Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back for those of you that know me. If you don't, my name is Jay. Welcome to my listening room. So right now, the speaker setup in my listening room is the Arendal 1961. And this speaker may look very familiar if you have been watching me for a while. And that's because not that long ago, I reviewed the flagship Arendal 1723 THX speakers. And those speakers were absolute bonkers. Absolutely amazing loudspeakers for the money. It was just incredible. Deep bass, extended, big speakers. So what are these about? Why do they look familiar? What's the difference? Well, first of all, these are much smaller. These will fit in almost every room because of this form factor. It's a slim cabinet. In fact, it's almost cute. But I have to tell you, don't be deceived by the slim form factor of this speaker. This speaker is one of the most visceral punching bass monsters I have seen. In fact, in terms of that punch and dynamics, I think this speaker is like right up there with like the Totem Tribe Towers, which is the king of the hill in terms of slim tower designs, at least in my opinion. The only difference is that these loudspeakers are about $2,000 for the pair. And considering that there's a lot of bookshelf and floor standing speakers for $2,000 in the market, from what I've heard and experienced, and I've experienced a lot of them, this is easily the top 5%. It goes in that category, top 5%, easily. But of course, it doesn't matter if it's top 5% or even top 1% if it's not the right fit for you. Any loudspeaker has to be the right fit for you. Not every loudspeaker is made for everyone. So let's talk about what this speaker is good at and what it's not good at. But one thing I can say for sure is that this speaker is a fun sounding loudspeaker. This is an awesome, fun monster. Now the short and sweet version is that this speaker is perfect for those that likes a mid-bass punch. Some visceral chest feeling, feel it in the chest kind of bass punch. Like, it is so dynamic. The speaker is a bass monster, especially in that mid bass. So if you're someone that likes a really nice bass punch and that's what you look for in a loudspeaker that is slim, can fit into any room, that is flexible to set up reasonably, and is quite good with multiple different gear, including inexpensive gear, then the Arendal 1961 may be the perfect fit for you. But every room is different. In my room, these speakers are just so much fun because of that visceral bass punch that is clean, it's not bloated, it is very tight and piston-like, hits you in the chest. It's like a startle your cat kind of bass punch. It is so dynamic and chest pounding. It is just so much fun to play multiple tracks, especially if you're a fan of rock, EDM, stuff with bass, you enjoy that. This speaker is just so much fun. But again, every room is different. So I like the fact that Arendal is offering 60-day in-home trial. They're gonna ship the speakers back from you, so there's actually zero risk. And I mean, this thing is built like a tank, and we'll talk about the materials that go into this in a bit. But in case you need warranty, this company does offer 10-year warranty. Now repeat after me, this video is not sponsored by Arendal. However, Arendal has offered to give my viewers an extra gift, and I don't know what this extra gift is, but you get that surprise gift when you purchase the 1961 loudspeakers specifically with the code J1961 when you check out. So use the code, get your free gift, and please tell me what this special gift is if you do decide to get the 1961, because I'm curious myself. Anyways, now let's talk about the build quality of these amazing loudspeakers for under $2,000. Still boggles my mind. So like I have said, the 1961 from Arendal is a speaker that is smaller than the 1723 THX. It's much slimmer, it is much compact, it is a very slim tower. Again, don't be fooled by the size. I was fooled by the size. I was like, this thing is gonna have no bass, but I was wrong. But anyways, the cabinet itself is made out of HDF, which is actually a better and a higher quality material than MDF, and some will argue otherwise, but HDF is a more expensive and a sturdy material. Medium density fiberboard versus high density fiberboard. They use it on their flagship 1723 THX, and also they didn't cheap out on the cabinet quality on the 1961 here. They still use HDF, which is good to see. Now you have 4 5.5-inch woofers. This is a 2.5 way speaker. And let me tell you, these 5.5-inch woofers produce some crisp dynamic output in terms of bass and that mid-bass punch, chest pounding. Again, really amazed with that. 28 millimeters in terms of the tweeter size, which is just above 1 inches. And it's a soft dome tweeter, which should suggest a pretty easy and laid back listening experience, but we'll talk more about that in the later part of this video. Again, this 28 millimeter soft dome tweeter is fitted to this waveguide, which is again Arendal's signature waveguide. You also saw it on the flagship 1723 THX. You know, one thing I like about Arendal is that they implement this waveguide to all of their lineups. You know, there's companies out there, often when you go to the lower end, you know, you kind of cheap out on the fundamental design choices, and you know, waveguide is something important and something that Arendal has implemented in all of their design. Now a waveguide, what it does in this case is to widen the dispersion pattern, which in turn allows the high frequencies that go up and up and up and get shorter and shorter and shorter. It becomes more directional, meaning that you're not going to get a wide sweet spot without this waveguide. This waveguide really allows for the high frequency to be non-piercing, at the same time allows you to have a wider sweet spot so that you don't have to have the speakers directly towed towards you and sit in that exact same spot to get a sweet spot and hear those high frequencies. So a waveguide is very important because it matches with the directivity of the rest of the woofer design, because the lower end, the lower frequencies are not as directional as the higher frequencies. So matching that is very important, and Arendal has done that in the 1961 tower loudspeakers. As you can see here, the speaker is tilted back slightly, so there's a slant design because again, to time align the drivers, but also because it's a slim design, you want the speakers to be slanted back a little bit so that the tweeter is in level with the listening height. Otherwise, if it's straight, this tower is a little bit too low for it to be anywhere near ear height. So again, well thought out design in terms of that slant design. I like it. Now, as you can see here, I have fitted the speaker with spikes, and it does come with spike holders, really nice spike holders, but I didn't use it because I don't really care about the floors. You can see a lot of bunch of holes on my floors already because I reviewed loudspeakers and try out multiple ones. And if you don't like spikes, they do offer a pluck, which is a really nicely made pluck, by the way. That is a non-spike solution if you don't want, you know, spikes for whatever reason on your floor or carpet. So this is a ported design. It does have a slot port at the back, which is a very different design from the 1723 THX, which had 3 distinctive ports that could be plugged with different foams to have different roll-offs, right? Different orientation of the port plug so that you can have different roll-off of the bass frequency. That was nice to see, but at the same time, you don't get that here, and that's understandable, but you do get a slot port, and you do get a foam that matches with that slot port to make this a sealed design. So yes, this can be heard as a sealed design or a ported design. So as you can see here, this is the in-room measured response. I measured the Arendal 1961 in-room in my room, and so this is the response, not to be confused with the frequency response that we'll show later in this video. That's more what the speakers are doing. This is more what is happening in my room with the speakers. So as you can see, there is a mid-bass rise on these speakers, and you can see that in the frequency graph too later that I will show you. So it's not just my room that has this huge mid-bass rise. But that mid-bass rise is interesting because that's exactly what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that impactful, visceral mid-bass that is really making the speaker dynamic, bold, and muscular sounding. I think it's also important to note here that based on my experience, just because you have a rise in the mid-bass doesn't translate to visceral, clean bass like you see in the Arendal 1961. When I hear the bass of the 1961, it's very clean, it's very speedy, it's very fast, it's tight, it's piston-like, it hits you in the chest. And for that clean bass to come through, it's not something you can get by just EQing up that mid-bass on any speaker. And I really like the fact that this speaker works really well with even inexpensive gear like the Subwoofer integrated amplifier that I showed in my Concept 50 review. In my Q Acoustic Concept 50 review, which was a great speaker, it didn't work quite well with the Subwoofer because I didn't find it to be a very good match. It just sounded kind of dry and not very exciting. But with the Arendal 1961, it works very well. And the tone controls on this thing also work very well with the Arendal. The Subwoofer has many different kinds of EQ settings, as well as bass increase, treble increase. It's a very flexible unit. But even with the flexibility, it just didn't sound good with the Concept 50, despite me trying multiple different things. With the Arendal 1961, it works well just right off the bat, but I can also increase the bass or lower the bass depending on the positioning of the speakers. For example, if I have to have it really close to the wall and the bass is getting boomy, then I can bring the bass down and that works beautifully. On the other hand, if I want to bring the speakers out more for that sound staging and depth in soundstage, and I want a little bit more bass output, then I can increase the bass as well. And also, if you find the treble to be a little bit too rolled off or too forward sounding, then you can also adjust it on the Savage and actually works very well with the Arendal 1961. So on a budget, I found this combination to be an exceptional combination. For example, when I'm playing this track right here, Muddy Waters, I absolutely love this track. It is a beautiful track. Definitely try it out in your system. And when I play this track, I hear like as if the water is flowing. It's kind of hard to explain. The sound field is just flowing, and there's so much bass. There's so much presence in the bass, and it's just very, very atmospheric. It is very punchy, dynamic. It's a very big scaled sound that I'm getting from these small towers. It's mind-boggling. Absolutely loved it, and I know that if I play these tracks, this specific track, with a speaker that doesn't have that bass authority, that doesn't have that kind of dynamic range, then I know it's gonna sound dry, it's gonna sound a bit boring. But with this track, my goodness, it was just beautiful, beautiful sound. Now in talking about the bass, this speaker doesn't have too much sub bass, and that's where it kind of is distinctive from the 1723 THX that I reviewed. Now the 1723 THX, that speaker went down really deep. It had really good scale, it had really good deep bass that was rumbling the foundation of my house. It was a really nice experience even without a subwoofer. Now the Arendal 1961, the smaller tower, doesn't do that, and I don't expect it to do that. It's a very small tower. But the mid bass is just as visceral, if not actually more tactile feeling because of the slim form factor and the smaller drivers. It's more tactile feeling, and that tactility really makes the speakers really, really fun. It kind of reminds me of Boreson loudspeakers. Now, if you don't know what a Boreson loudspeaker is a very high-end loudspeaker that I was able to hear at shows. Now, I haven't reviewed it yet, but I am getting a pair in here fairly soon, I hope. So that's kind of the feeling I get. And for $2,000 US, just getting even close to that feeling of the Boreson tactility and bass authority and punch and dynamics and the cleanliness, the clean bass output, that's something to be said. And especially when you play tracks like Yellow, and that's a track that I play a lot. I've mentioned it before in my videos. It's a very good track, and you get all the microdynamics and stuff like that. But what's impressive about the Arendal 1961 is that not so much the micro details, but all the tactility. Like you feel all the tactility when you go do-do, do-do. Like if you feel that, and it's very, very fun. And that's why I say this speaker is a very fun sounding loudspeaker, because it just gives you a lot of tactility and texture and bass authority. Even though it's not going too low, it is not shaking the house, but it is certainly punching your walls, punching your chest. It is a very visceral, impactful sound you get from such a small tower. That is why I'm so impressed, especially with this track Yellow. The microdynamics is better on, like, say, the Q-Acoustic Concept 50s that I reviewed, which is about $3,000 US, or even the Platimon Monocoustic, which is, again, $6,500 US. So there's a big price gap. So you don't get that kind of micro detail in the highs. But what you do get is that tactility in the bass that is even something you don't get in the Platimon or the Q-Acoustic. This is a fun sounding loudspeaker, I'm telling you. And let's be honest, if we just add a subwoofer, which I did, like I added the big subwoofer, the big boys for the low frequencies. I mean, now we're getting sub bass and that mid bass visceral punch to a blissful bass heaven. I mean, if you like bass, if you're a bass head, that add a subwoofer to these and you get scale for days. You get bass like smacking you in the chest, just rumbling your house foundation. It is a beautiful speaker, and I see why a lot of home theater enthusiasts like Arendal speakers, because I mean the 1961 and the 1723 THX are absolute bass monsters. And it's not just bass like a boombox, but actually quality, clean bass. Now moving on to the mid-range. Now for the mid-range, I played one of the most classical music that I always play, which is Waterfall by Sarah Kay. Love this track. My girlfriend hates it because I play it all the time, but hey, this track I know very well. And I would say the voice is very good. There's good imaging. The soundstage isn't as deep as the Q Acoustic Concept 50s per se, but it's quite deep, it's quite natural. It's almost like a private listening session, not so much like a venue, but more like the person is in your room, like sitting right behind your speakers. That kind of depth, which is quite nice. The voices is sweet, but it's not as sweet or as well, refined as the Arendal 1723 THX, which actually kind of surprised me. When I first got this speaker in, I expected that this speaker would have the mids and highs of the Arendal 1723 THX, but the bass would be lacking because it's a smaller tower. It's quite the opposite. This speaker has really tactile bass. It's like almost a total different sound, but it's nowhere as sweet as the 1723 THX. It's not as refined, but it is quite, detailed. Despite my in-room response of showing that the high frequency is rolled off, I don't get that feeling. And that's where the measurement I took in my subjective listening kind of departs. The high frequency is quite snappy. It is quite detailed. In fact, if I play poor recordings, like really poor recordings, then it gets a little bit too much. You have to like detail. If you're a Focal fan, if you're like a Magical fan, I think you'll find this speaker to be a really nice balance. And yes, I played around with some tube amplifier like the Bruno Go, and that was a wonderful match once again. I love the Bruno Go integrated tube amplifier. It's just beautiful sounding with so many different speakers, and this was no exception. The 1961 had tactile bass, but then the spaciousness, the depth increase, the soundstage, it was beautiful. Again, I played the same track, Sarah Kay, just to go back and see what the differences were. And again, the voices were sweeter. It was more pinpoint. Despite being a tube amplifier with the Arendal 1961, it was more pinpoint. It was more spacious sounding, both in width and depth. Now it sounded more like a venue. So again, what does this all mean? Well, this speaker, the mid-range and high frequency isn't the most refined right off the bat, but it can be somewhat adjusted depending on the amplifier you use. It is a speaker that you can play around with to a degree to where you can match a tube amplifier, for example, like the Bruno Go, and the high frequency becomes a little bit more relaxed and laid back, but still retains that sweetness and still has that kind of, high frequency, sparkle. I've tried many different amplifiers from solid state to non-solid state, like the tube amplifier, but by far my favorite combination is the tube, and it's not inexpensive, unfortunately. And that's the thing, the 1961 can be scaled up to a very good level to where you're like, whoa, this is impressive. This is really impressive. Like both mids and highs and bass, everything is very impressive. And these two is the normal integrated amplifier as well as the Burson monoblock amplifiers. So what's the difference? Well, with the Burson, you get tactility for days. I mean, it is so tactile. It is just like you feel it, like it's almost like you can touch the bass. It's very tactile, absolutely so much fun. The mid-range and high frequency is detailed. It is quite detailed. It is quite clean sounding. So again, if you're a fan of Magical, Focal, speakers like that, then you will be a huge fan of this combination. I mean, this is a beautiful combination. The Norma, what you get out of there is that you get a more rounded bass. You get a warmer sound, but you don't sacrifice the details. So it is quite detailed, but you have a more rounded bass that seems to extend more than the Burson. So it feels a little bit less tactile than the Burson, but overall it feels more grounded. It feels like more of a bottom-up sound, which means that the speakers feel more grounded, sounds more grounded. Like Wilson Audio, for example, you get that grounded sound, especially in the sub bass. It's not a floating bass. It's like an open baffle sound, but pressurizing, bass control kind of sound. So in conclusion, if you have a more refined gear, then the speakers will be more refined. It will become more refined, but it's not totally refined right off the bat with something like Savage, but you can tune it to get it more refined with the treble control and stuff like that, more balanced in your room. So as always, there's a trade-off. And overall, this is kind of the sound that I would recommend for people that have an entertainment room, not a listening room. So let's say you do 50% music, 50% movie, or 70% music and 30% movie or what have you, then you might be looking for a speaker that does both really well. And I think this is a really good mid ground for $2,000 US. I think this is probably the best kind of like balance here for that kind of purpose. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope this video was helpful and entertaining, and if it was, please click that like button. It helps my channel out greatly and it doesn't cost you anything. And I hope to see you guys in the future. I have more plans and more videos coming about audio just like this. So make sure you're subscribed and click that bell notification so you don't miss the next one. And that's pretty much it from me, and I'll see you guys on my next journey. Until next time.